delighted to introduce Corey, who's a technical manager solution architecture for Delphix, to take us through the Delphix approach to DataOps. One of the greatest challenges for the software quality community is the transition from traditional waterfall methods of development to DevOps. And I think for a lot of organizations, DevOps still represents something of a nirvana, because while the development methodology can be described perhaps as DevOps, a lot of the infrastructure and the basic ingredients that are required to enable development have not been transitioned to DevOps. Our speaker today is Corey Brune of Delphix, and we did some research with Delphix last year, which showed that access to appropriate development and test data was a key obstacle, not only in the development process, but in elimination of defects and bugs, because buggy data as part of the software testing process led to buggy software being produced. And excessively perfect data, which didn't represent the real world, led to the leaving behind defects. So we know that it's a major challenge, and that challenge in a sense is made the greater by the move to DevOps. Corey Brune and Delphix have helped to pioneer a concept of DataOps, making the data fit for purpose. And so I'm delighted to introduce Corey.
Oh, thank you very much. Let me share my screen real quick. All right. All right, so I know we don't have a whole lot of time, so I'll just go ahead and jump into this. So again, talking just about different initiatives that we have within our companies, right? We're talking about going from waterfall to agile or to DevOps. You know, what really drives that in the back end is data. Applications really don't make a lot of sense without that data, right? So how do we go from your traditional waterfall, you know, that needs databases, you know, refresh maybe, you know, once every 3-4 months, to needing that data now within minutes, right? And very fresh data, production-like data. How do we get that down into our CI pipelines? How do we get that into our automated workflows? And then when we're talking about cloud services, right? So how do we move that data that we're talking, you know, terabytes of data, tens, hundreds of terabytes of data from our on-prem, how do we move that into our cloud? Or how do we do a hybrid cloud where we're talking about, you know, GCP and Amazon at the same time? How do we move that data around efficiently? We need to be able to do that in order to efficiently use cloud services. And then yesterday we heard several keynotes talking about analytics and using some innovations with AI and ML and some of the great things that we're doing there. But behind the scenes, in order to train your AI and especially your ML, machine learning and natural learning, all that, or natural language, I should say, all that is driven through data. So every initiative that we're going through today, all is being driven through data. All right, so this is typically what we see in a traditional sense. So, you know, we're trying to, you know, the top bar is talking about the different initiatives that we're going through, right? So we're going through, yesterday we heard at least one or two speakers talk about, you know, moving from a monolithic application to microservices. How is that done? How are we able to move from what's traditionally, you know, huge databases to smaller databases in microservices? We have to release faster. So no matter what we're doing, even if we're staying in waterfall, we're transitioning over to DevOps, we need to be able to release faster. We have to keep up with our competition. We have to innovate. We have to keep our product moving forward or add to our product. And in order to do that, traditionally, it's very difficult, right? Because we have a lot of customization there. We have a lot of issues as far as trying to move from one gate. So maybe from pre-prod to QA, or from QA to pre-prod or to production. There's a lot of wait time as far as, you know, how do we get our databases refreshed? How do we test with good quality data? How do we do all that kind of database refreshes without having to create a ticket and wait days, right? How do we do things like that, right? And typically this is what we see. And really it all boils down to not being able to move fast enough from the data layer, right? So we have really great tools in place right now for application releases. So we can go out and do a git commit, git push, and we can build our application within minutes. But where it slows down, where we start to see problems occur, is that data that we're doing, say, unit tests against or system integration tests, whatever it is, we're seeing that the quality is, or that those tests typically aren't really finding the defects until it's actually in production. So what we're wanting to do, what we're finding is with higher quality data, we're able to shift left much faster and actually be able to triage those defects much quicker because we have quality data. And this is just a sample of defect resolution, right? So on the left-hand side, typically, especially if we're talking about monolithic applications, typically what we're looking at is, say SQL Server, Oracle, Mongo. We have a bunch of different data sources. And typically, depending on the organization, we're looking at different groups. So we'll have a SQL Server data DBAs, we'll have Oracle DBAs and what have you, right? So every time we have a different data source or every time we have a different database, a database group, we're having to hand that off. So anytime that we have to actually triage a defect, especially if it's one in production, we're having to basically take a snapshot of that time, synchronize across all those databases, and then try to find that defect. And then you multiply that against how many defects we actually are finding, because again, we're not having really good quality data in our test cases. We're seeing larger amounts of defects there. That just means that, one, our productivity is going down dramatically because we're not able to find those defects fast enough. We're not able to get that data in to actually start triaging the issues. And because of that, a lot of times we're seeing the developer experience, the tester experience really be impacted because they're mostly waiting around, waiting for their environment to be ready. So this is our DataOps platform. So instead of being convoluted and having multiple ways or lots of stop gaps, what we have is a platform in order to be able to release that data much faster. And not only that, we're not having to rely on operations necessarily to do that. So if we're a developer or QA person, if we need to go out and say we need the latest snapshot from production, we need to do a test case or whatever we need to do, we can tell Delphix or DataOps Platform, we can say, hey, I need a database refresh. And within minutes, I can deliver that data back to my test cases, all automated. So instead of having to wait for somebody to actually, push a button, however they're doing their databases refreshes or, data pumps or whatever it is, we have an API call. And with that API call, we can tell our platform, hey, I need this and I need it right now. I'm doing a build or I'm about to do an automated test. I need that data right now inside of my pipeline. I can't wait hours, because if I wait hours, I'm breaking my CI pipeline. I need that data and I need it very, very quickly. Not only that, so the other thing that we're very concerned about is making sure that not only are we delivering that data, but we're delivering data securely. So instead of just giving data from production down to lower environments, we actually secure that data. So we have a masking product that will go in, and before it's released down to lower environments downstream, what we do is we say, okay, so Corey Brune needs a new database refresh, but before we give Corey that data, we're going to secure it. So the usernames, the credit card numbers, whatever the data is that we need secured, will be secured downstream. So Corey Brune in production will never exist in lower environments. And that's intelligently done across multiple data sets. So in my test cases, if I have to run a query against Corey Brune in Oracle and make sure that Corey Brune also exists, say in SQL Server or Mongo or whatever it is, that is intelligently done. So all across all my data sets, Corey Brune becomes Sam Smith, say downstream. So my information never leaves my production zone. Developers will never see Corey Brune in a lower environment. Very, very important, especially in today's society where we see plenty of security data related issues. So with that, we can make sure that everything's automated and delivered very, very quickly. So the other important part about having a DataOps platform is really just making sure that it's built for scale. So we're typically looking at multi-terabyte databases. So we need to be able to scale up so we can handle hundreds of terabytes, petabytes of data very easily and still solve the issue of being able to do continuous testing, be able to do unit tests against, say, subsets. So there's a lot of really a lot of use cases with DataOps, especially if we're wanting to move fast and be able to release faster and more reliably. Okay, so talking about Delphix. So a little bit about Delphix. As you can see here, we have pretty much in the true traditional sense of the word, DevOps platform. On the left-hand side, we have the operational side of the DevOps, right? So on the left-hand side is where traditionally your DBAs or your sysadmins would live, right? So this is where they ingest the data. So they'll tell Delphix, hey, there's a production source here. It's a database, or it's flat files, binaries, whatever it is. Go out there and ingest that. And then from there, we can set up automated syncs. So we can tell Delphix, hey, I want you to sync that data, say, every 15 minutes or every day or once a week, whatever the cadence is. We have the flexibility from an operational side to say who we back up, where we back it up from, and how often we back that up. Not only that, but we have a huge amount of storage savings. So depending on the type of data, we can get anywhere from a 40 to 50% data reduction just by ingesting. So if you're ingesting, say, a 10 terabyte database, that storage inside of Delphix will only represent maybe about five terabytes instead of 10, right? And then in the middle side, again, still kind of talking more on the operational side, this is where we do our security. So we can mask, our masking product will actually profile the data. So a lot of times customers don't really understand or really know what the back end data looks like, or development sometimes will add in a column or two and not really say anything going upstream. So we profile the data and we'll provide a report saying, hey, we think these columns need to be masked just based on certain characteristics of that data. So we can do that automated for you. And that's not just a one-time thing. So we can keep profiling the databases just to make sure that we're catching everything. This is something that a report that you could hand over to auditors if that's needed. So all that information is done and provided to either sysadmins, DBAs, or to any operations on the security side as well. On the right-hand side is really where we start talking more about the dev and the DevOps, right? So on the right-hand side, we're talking more the developers, BI analysts, machine learning, anybody on that's not operations, I guess, testers. I talked about this earlier. We can go out and do our own database refreshes. We can tell Delphix through API calls, hey, yeah, I'm about to do a unit test. Go ahead and do a database refresh. I want to get the latest snapshot of production. I need that for my unit test or whatever it is, right? The other unique part about Delphix is I, as an or not operations, but as a developer or end user, I can go out and create a snapshot in time. So just like what you would think a traditional bookmark, you know, without, I guess, even books on digital books have bookmarks, but essentially it's the same thing. I can do that with data now. So inside of Delphix, I can tell Delphix, hey, go ahead and save this point in time. I'm about to run a system test. I want you to save this point in time because I'm going to do some destructive testing. I want to rewind back to this point in time. I don't want to have to cleanse my data again or do another refresh. Just save this point in time so I can come back to it. So you can tell Delphix after you run your first test iteration, Delphix, I need to go back to that bookmark, and we'll go back to that bookmark within minutes. The other unique part is I can share that bookmark. So if I hit a defect, if I'm in QA and I hit a defect, I can log that defect inside of Jira, Bugzilla, whatever it is. I can log that defect and then share that bookmark from Delphix. I can share it down to development and say, hey, development, here's a bookmark, a save point in time. I need you to go ahead and, you know, spin up your copy of that data while I keep continuing my testing because we hit this defect. So what development will do is they'll take their copy, their bookmark, spin up their database, and be able to see exactly the point in time, not only from code, but also the data environment. So now they can triage that defect much, much faster than what they've been able to in the past. Because in the past, we, you know, typically development doesn't have the freshest data. It's usually lagging behind. With Delphix, we can tell it, hey, this is your new bookmark. Go ahead and spin everything up and triage that defect. You can find that defect much faster because you have the exact environment, data and code combined to find that defect much faster. The other things that we do, we can do branching, just like what we do in code. So, you know, I'm more of a Git person than Bitbucket or whatever. So, you know, within Git, you would just say Git branch, you know, branch 1, 2, 3. Delphix, you can do the same thing. So just like what we do in code, we can do in Delphix as well. So now when I create my CI pipeline, I do a commit and a branch, you know, say development branch or whatever, I can go ahead and say, hey, Jenkins, Travis CI, GitLab, whatever it is, I can say, hey, you know, go ahead and check out this branch, build it. But this is branch, you know, fix 1, 2, 3. Go ahead and check out the same branch in Delphix because that's what I've been developing against. So we'll go ahead and do that and make sure that whenever we do our unit test, whatever test we're doing, we can make sure that our code environment matches exactly what our data environment is. That way we're, again, shifting left. We're able to find defects much faster if there are any, and be able to triage those defects much, much quicker. Everything's read-write, so just like any other database that you have today traditionally, with Delphix, it operates exactly the same. Same monitoring, same scripts, you know, if you're using Toad, whatever it is, it's the same database. It's just you're using data coming from Delphix versus coming from a SAN or a NAS or anything like that. The other thing to note is we are deployable anywhere, meaning that we can be on premise, we can be out on a public cloud, or we can also help with the transition from premise or on premise over to hybrid cloud. So if if you have production on premise and you have non-prem in the cloud, we can help migrate that data from on-prem to the cloud. Or if you're looking for a full migration from on-premise over to the cloud, we can help with that data transition as well. All right, so creating virtual environments on demand, basically. So if we're wanting to look at things like being able to create virtual or temporary or ephemeral environments, we're able to do that very easily with Delphix because we can spin up those virtual databases within minutes. We can create those virtual databases, do our testing, and then spin everything back down wherever we need to. In this picture, what we're looking at is on the left-hand side, we have our data sources. So again, we can have databases, we can have flat files, binaries, whatever it is, some type of data. And on the right-hand side, we're just creating those virtual databases. Again, it could be a temporary or ephemeral environment. It could be a long-standing environment. So if we're going through a 2-week sprint, something like that, we can create those virtual environments or virtual databases and be able to provide that data over to our testing team or developers. All right, so we have the concept of a timeline. So whenever we have a database or a virtual database, a set of virtual databases, whatever is inside of our data environment, we can make sure that development has a copy, test has their own copy, stage, whatever it is, and they can not only deliver that data very quickly within minutes, we can refresh that data, whatever it is, we can make sure that through API calls that is delivered, whatever the operation is that particular group needs. And again, so development can have their own copy, they can do their testing, whatever they need to do. Tests can have their own copy, and even we can even break that down even further to, development that's working on application 1, 2, 3, and then we have another development group that's working on 4, 5, 6. So we can create many different copies of our databases because of the storage that we're saving. We can have multiple copies of the data and still be underneath what we'd have, which lends itself to being able to really scale out, being able to use more data environments, be able to scale that up. All right, so just kind of, I was alluding to this earlier. So, before it's very serial, mostly because moving 10 terabytes or however many terabytes of data around is very costly, because say if we have a 10 terabyte database, we have 3 or 4 different projects, that's 30, 40 terabytes. Whereas with Delphix, because we have, compression as well as block sharing. So every time we create a virtual database, day 0, what's happening is we're basically using snapshots underneath. So because we're using snapshots, we're just reusing data from the parent snapshot. So instead of having 30 terabytes here, what we'd have is 5 terabytes because of compression plus a 400 meg per VDB. Now that data will grow as we start to have, as soon as we start doing updates or inserts. But day 0, or anytime we do a refresh, that data will be reused and will go back down to 200 to 300 meg instead of the 10 terabytes or 30 terabytes that we see. All right, so bookmarking, just like what we were talking about earlier. So at any time we can tell Delphix, hey, we want a bookmark set here, but say I need to go rewind. So at any point, development or test or QA, anybody can take a shared bookmark, or if they have a private bookmark to themselves, they can rewind their data environment to a specific point in time or to a specific bookmark or create a new branch. So, and that doesn't affect the timeline because we can move in and out of that timeline anywhere we want to. So if we have, say, if we find a defect from maybe a day ago, we can rewind, say, a day and a half ago to see what happened, right? So we can see exactly what's happening there. And we can, say, activate another branch to, say, branch 1, 2, 3, and not affect the main branch. So there's a lot of functionality that we can do, and really within one database or one set of databases. So within Delphix, we have the concept of a data environment. Within that data environment can have one database, it could have 2 databases, 10 databases. And the operations are synced across all those databases. So if I create a bookmark, that point in time across all those data sets. Or if I want to do a refresh, I do a refresh across all those data sets at the same time. So no longer am I having to wait for 2 or 3 different groups to synchronize and refresh all at the same time. Whenever I tell Delphix I want to refresh, Delphix does it automatically for me. Okay, and then treat every version of data just like what we do with code. very, very important, especially when finding defects. Whenever we find a defect, we can branch, or if we're working on, say, a new enhancement, or if we're working on a defect, we can branch our data, work on that data, tell whatever the application is that's driving our automation, and tell it, say, hey, when you check out this branch in code, go ahead and build it, but at the same time, check out the branch, that same branch in my data. So when we go to do our unit tests, our test cases, whatever it is, we can make sure that our environment is exactly the way it was designed to be. All right, so providing self-service to a data library. So data library, data repository, what have you, same basic concept. So on the left-hand side, we have our production sources. So again, that's data, right? So that's databases, it's flat files, binaries, what have you. In the middle is where we do the data preparation. So this is where we do data security. We can subset, add synthetic data, cleanse the data before we're running system tests, whatever it is. That's where we do our data preparation. It's especially important when we're talking about AI, ML, analytics. We need to cleanse that data in some fashion. And on the right-hand side is really creating that test library. So if we're masking the data, subsetting, adding synthetic data, whatever it is, we have that available to all of our users inside of Delphix. So within Delphix, because we're sharing the point in time or bookmarks, me as a developer, I can go out and say, hey, I'm about to run a unit test. I need 1% of my data. So check out that 1%, because I need to run really fast unit tests. I don't really want the whole system integration, so I don't want a full copy of my data. Just give me 1% of my data, run my unit tests, and pass it down the line if everything's successful. Whereas if I'm running, say, a new product, I need some synthetic data, right? So I would just check out that bookmark out of the data repository or data library and be able to check that out and use that data, and then check a different bookmark. So there's a lot of different things that I can do within Delphix to really help accelerate testing, really help improve data quality, and really shift left and find defects much faster. And with that, I'm sorry I went a little bit over, so I'm finished at this point. So if you want to take over.
Thank you. Well, we do have a question from Ina Zalezny of New York Life. And she wanted she had a question about configuration, which is whether when we come to the branching and data recalls, is that something that is configured by the developer themselves, or is it something that you have to configure as part of the admin function?
So the branching, bookmarking, refreshing, that's all. So the operational side, DBAs, will give you access to that. So they'll give you access to whatever data environments that you need, but then it's up to you. You have the power to do branching. You have the power to do refreshing. You have the power to do pretty much anything inside of that data environment. It's all up to you. So yes, the power is given to you, and you can use the API calls or UI.
I must say that's really helpful, Corey, because my experience running development groups has been that all too readily you take the shortcut. The data isn't available on demand.
Right.
And I have seen, and I think others have seen, people take live data. Very scary in a financial environment.
Yeah.
Clear compliance issues. Not that anything's ever gone wrong or could possibly go wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Corey, thank you so much for that contribution.